So let's add entity framework to our project. Now from the previous exercise, if you remember, we installed the Bootstrap and jQuery using the library manager. However, those were client-side libraries. Entity framework is not client-side. That one can be installed using the NuGet. So let's go to Tools, NuGet Package Managers, and Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. Let's go to Browse, and we want Entity Framework. And the one I want to install is Microsoft.entityframework.core.sql server. So I'm gonna select it, check the installation path, which is for the project, and currently I'm going to install the latest stable version, which is 3.1.5, and just click Install. You can see here the installation on the bottom. We're going to click OK for the changes and accept the licenses, and the entity framework was installed. The error here is for the namespace model, which is from the hub controller, which we discussed in the previous video. We simply don't have any models in our models folder, but the entity framework was installed. When we go to dependencies and packages, you can see Microsoft Entity Framework Core SQL Server 3.1.5 was installed. Now, as we use the entity framework, it will create one additional folder. We are already familiar with the models, views, and controls folders, and we already discussed the app settings JSON and startup.cs. Now, both these app settings JSON and startup.cs are gonna be very important, because in app settings.json we will add the connection string to the database, and startup.cs will configure the middleware, including how we create the DB sets for our entity framework. But one folder that the entity framework will create as we use it is migrations. And this folder will contain files that are to be used to create SQL Server local DB database. And you'll see it in action in just a minute. Now, entity framework provides several classes and a method, and the method is onModelCreating. And this one is called when the context is created. The DB context is what is used to communicate with the database. Now, the DB context can have some options as well, and those options would store the configuration options for the DB context. So that will be the options how we communicate with the database. And then there's also gonna be DB sets with the entity, and this is basically a collection of objects created for the entity. For example, we'll have entity songs, so we will have DB set for songs. So that's gonna be basically a list of all songs, but this time coming from the database. Alright, so the entity framework was installed, and now let's create our models.